Okay, great. As you just saw in the movie, you are part of a series of online events that we have at Florence School of Regulation. And we have different formats. And this format is called FSR Insights. And in FSR Insights, we always invite a few academics. You can already see them. And I will introduce them to you one by one. Maybe also nice to mention is that FSR Insights has two hosts, which is Lucila and I. So we will continue to run this series every month, one episode. And this one, I think, is also quite interesting because Lucila mobilized some colleagues that have been involved in a special issue that is going to be published by Elsevier in the journal called Energy Policy. And it's quite a particular topic because it's about lessons from energy policy failures, right? So that's not maybe something we talk about every day. And it's really great that we have here Raphael with us and Maciej, and they are both the co-editors of this special issue. And also, I think what you have learned, if you watched the videos that we use to lure you into this seminar, right? These introductory videos, then you already know that they have really spanned the globe because they argue in their video that when you talk about policy failure, I think it's important to learn from what is happening all across the world. And both of them are European. They started in Europe. Raphael in the UK, Maciej in Poland, and Maciej decided to go west, I guess east, sorry, all the way to Japan. And as you can see, his background is completely in tune with where he is. And maybe you can see it also in the picture of Raphael. He went all the way west. So they are really, if you would look at the globe, really on almost, I think, opposite sides, right? And they did that all for us to be able to bring you more interesting case studies. As I said, they are both academics. They have all kinds of titles like head of department, professor, you know, what we are used to with academics. Raphael is currently based in the Caribbean. I had to look it up, Raphael. It's just above Venezuela, a bit on the right. A very beautiful island of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think we all know where Japan is, so I do not have to clarify that. You already know they provided videos. They introduced the topic, which means that we can devote most of the time to discussion, which is what we like in this online event. In the video, Maciej already showed us his nunchako and how nunchako provides an interesting perspective on energy policy failure because it has two sides, right, the nunchako. So Maciej argued on the one side, failures might sometimes be somewhat painful and lead to a crisis, but on the other side are also necessary, right? We need some failures to learn and to improve policy. So we're not pointing any fingers here today. We're just here to collect some interesting learnings, right? That maybe we can improve on in the future. Then Raphael's video, I also liked very much because he said we can look at policy failures from the perspective of energy justice. And he has built a career around the topic of energy justice. And he nicely shared some of the main frameworks they use. And I learned that indeed you can look at it by saying we have a lot of rights, right? And to the extent that these environmental rights or these human rights or other type of rights are violated, we can speak of an energy policy failure. And he also argued that these kind of failures can occur all along the life cycle of a project, from planning, extraction to supply chains, all the way to consumption. Then we have very happy to have among us also Maria, who kindly agreed to join us and she's currently affiliated with the university in Madrid, the UCM 3M, and she will, ask a few questions together with Lucila, who is in a bit of a double role today because she will act as a discussant for Raphael and Maciej, but she's also one of the authors in the special issue, where she did a case study on good governance using indicators. So she's happy to take questions on that because she also made a video and she will ask some questions herself. Normally we divide this more or less half-half. Half of the event is questions by Lucila and Maria. And in the other half, we'll make sure that all the questions the audience is posting in the chat box or in the Q&A box are picked up by us and I can help screen this box, but my panel can also, of course, engage themselves in that chat box and Q&A. So don't hesitate to already start putting questions in there. I will try to keep an eye on that. But as I said, we will kick off with our two discussants. And Maria kindly agreed to go first. So Maria, go ahead and start firing your questions.
So hello to everyone. And thanks for the opportunity to join this excellent seminar. Of course, I have little to add to this excellent background papers that I have been reading. And well, so I just humbly advancing these questions. Before I start with the questions, I would actually like to say that since the first time I met Raphael in the Catalan conference, the first Catalan conference in environmental law in 2018, I was really inspired by his social justice theory applied to the energy policy sector. And I thought it was some sort of hopefulness agenda for transforming the energy policy sector at this, especially at this hugely important moment. So, well, my first question is for both of you. And we know some drivers of problems are intrinsic to energy regulation, especially in competition law rules. So we find a contrast between short-run efficiency and long-run ones. And we have seen that with the energy price crisis. So some consequences are also unpredictable. And according to this, how can we ensure that lessons from policy failure turns into inputs to the redesign of energy regulation, rather than generating short-term reaction from regulators that have actually little advantages for the whole legal framework? And
thank you, Maria. Very timely question, right?
Very tricky.
Who wants to take this first?
Raphael, what do you think about it? Yeah, go
on. Thank you for volunteering me. So a very tricky question to start off with, or you could say it's one that we could spend a whole hour talking about, and probably several more hours. So I will give my answer in a couple of minutes. And, you know, I'm not sure if EU policymakers or policymakers and different governments around the EU will take notice. But I mean, we do need to be looking for the medium to longer term solutions. And one of the things Maciej and I identify in the paper is, as we look for 2030 Paris Agreement targets, as we think about 2050, 2060, you know, net zero ambitions, whatever each country has, not just in the EU, but globally, you know, we need to think about policy failure in different ways. And to me, there's a lot of discussion by policymakers today, politicians saying, oh, the short-term solution is, you know, gas or other fossil fuels, let's say in Germany, coal, can give us these short-term fixes. And we shouldn't be allowing the politicians put forward that agenda. And despite, let's say, COP26 conference recently, we can still see that the major banks continue to fund fossil fuel projects. I just saw a report was released a couple of days ago on that in the newspapers. And for me, I think we need to be taking more risks around clean energy solutions. And when we think of the regulatory issues, I mean, Maria mentioned the issue of competition very briefly. I mean, competition now should be on the way out. I mean, I'm not sure if I ever agreed that competition was in place in the first place. It always supported the fossil fuels. But I think if we're serious about climate change, we need to support the clean energy ambitions of the EU. We need to do it properly. We need to interfere in the market, and we need to start taking significant risk, because as we allude to in the paper, you know, even if you're taking risks with different kinds of low carbon energy, you can still achieve just outcomes. going back to the incumbent energy sources is not going to deliver us just outcomes. And that will be my message, that I think society should be ready to take a bit more risk. I don't think renewables are as risky as everyone is saying they are. They are coming down in cost hugely, both in the developed world and the developing world. And I think that's what we should remember. These are becoming cost competitive. And if we were to do a full cost analysis, we would find out that fossil fuels are more expensive. The carbon tax is not yet high enough. And also the decommissioning costs are not yet fully transferred to fossil fuel energy sources. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Maciej.
Yeah, thank you very much. In the northern island of Japan, in Hokkaido, there's a monument of a US scholar who settled a university in Sapporo. And there's the monument, and then this monument, there's a slogan, "Boys, be ambitious." Yeah. Now I would say the girls too. Yeah, but this is also the message to those policymakers. Yeah, be ambitious. And we had this dilemma during the work on this paper, because there's a trap of this short-term goals, or even this mid approach, where those easier solutions, where those also populist solutions are very tricky, and they are tempting the policymakers when it comes to the costs, when it comes to those solutions that are easy to go, that are easy to implement. And here, referring this to your question, Maria, which is a very good question, because how we can enhance and provide this good ways of dealing with energy policy to omit those failures is trying to learn from those previous failures. But how to reach this goal is being ambitious, trying to use those sometimes most expensive solutions, but that which are in the line with those sustainable development goals, with this global consensus. It's also very important here that we don't have those who skip these approaches. But again, this needs a global approach, and this Paris Agreement is a good framework for trying to open this discussion, also when it comes to those who do not want to achieve those long-term goals. But as we observe, we have now this global consensus on climate neutrality with different goals added, with different timelines, like China 2060. But still, there's ambition there, yeah, at least when it comes to these long-term goals. And it offers some ways for the discussion. And of course, in any regime, legal regime, we cannot offer this 100% sure obligation that all will fulfill these commitments, even when it comes to the climate change or sustainable development goals. Because like in Mexico right now, and we'll have also the paper about Mexico in our special issue, but we observe that there's the agenda on reversing the energy liberalization that for the very long time was a paradigm of, is still, of European Union, of United States, of the world. Japan, same. Even in China, we have such approaches that open the market, yeah, to some extent, of course. And in Mexico, we are just reversing this trends. Raphael mentioned competition, yeah, but we can say whether this energy policy failure and how to stop it. Yeah, there's the democratic government, and they are conducting their agenda.
Okay, very interesting. I did not know about that case of Mexico. Maria, please, or you will take turns with Lucila.
Lucila, you go.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Maciej, for being here. And I think I discussed with Maria this morning on how we would organize the flow of the questions. And I think one thing that I see in common between the policy failure and energy policy, policy failures and energy justice, is that both of these attempts, if policy failures is a methodological approach, if energy justice is more theoretical and practical as an approach, but both things have something in common is to mobilize legal scholarship to be more normative. So it's and here, as far as we have this FSI Insights is more academic venue of FSI, I think it's important I asked you to speak about this. And I think the challenging of and you have taken it as a big challenge, and I think it's what makes your both work fascinating, is that you wanted to mobilize a legal scholarship that tends to be and studied to be, because of course you tend to come from a doctrinal understanding, more descriptive understanding of law, how the law is interpreted, how the law is applied, but hardly takes as a normative approach. How you see yourselves as a role and what you have to do, especially, for instance, Raphael, you who are now Dean of the University, how you see the role of the university educating legal students or lawyers to take a more normative role in their research and voices in this debate?
Thank you very much, Lucila, for that question. And that very much, you have hit the, let's say, the key point for me when we think of scholarship in this area of justice in the energy sector, but also more broadly for a legal scholar generally. And let's say for me, in a lot of legal research, there maybe has been a more passive approach to exploring doctrinal issues. So for those non-lawyers on the call, doctrinal issues really refers to studying the actual written law itself and what it means and essentially what it could mean. And then we have the case law approach, where people are studying particular legal cases that occur in the courtrooms. And for me, that often meant that people did not reflect on where does law want us to go and what is the ambition of where we want to go in the future. And let's say that's why, in particular, when we think of energy, we think of climate change, we're thinking of timelines. Where do we want to go for 2030? Where do we want to be for 2050? And just to give you a small but very brief story, I recently spoke to a very good scholar in the energy area, in the energy law space. And I asked them, what was their view on the energy sector? Where did they want the energy sector to go? And, they struggled to precisely say what it was they wanted. Did they want revenue for governments? Did they want economic development? Was justice a concern? Climate change? And I think that's the kind of thing that we are trying to counter here with this special issue, but also in terms of the justice research in the energy sector. And very much I see it as every law student who enters university should evolve to where they have a normative goal. This is something that they want or desire in this particular area of law that they're interested in. And as a sort of another side note, I say to some students that, what was the reason you entered law in the first place? So maybe they should remember when they were maybe 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and they had that first ambition to be a lawyer. So why was it they had that ambition? What was it that they wanted to correct? So maybe after I'm finished, Lucila, you could highlight what was it that motivated you to become a lawyer when you were a young, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old. And I think that's the important thing we should remember. For me, when we think of the energy sector, we should be saying, we should always have at the back of our mind, and it's not just whether you're a lawyer, it's whether you're any type of social scientist, engineer, other scientists. And I think that's been the success of energy justice research, because all people have been able to identify and say, well, the one common raison d'etre of the energy sector should be, it should bring more justice to this world. And I think that's what we've seen. That's what we want energy policy failure to reflect on. And I mean, for me, every energy lawyer that you meet, I know there are lots of energy law conferences coming up in Europe that I'm sure, Lucila, you'll be attending a few of them. And I think that's the key question to ask people is, what does your research want to achieve? And for me, justice should be the cornerstone. I mean, we can talk about the economic development or revenue growth from the energy sector, but I mean, we've proven over the last 200 years of energy extraction, focusing on the economics or efficiency of the energy sector has not delivered just outcomes and has not positioned us where we want to be today. Thank you.
Maciej, do you want to say something? Do you want to about this part? About this point, it's a Rouge topic.
So yeah. I'm very sad that Raphael didn't ask me why I started my legal education, but okay, let's reveal it for another occasion. Yeah? Just I'm inspired by some good Hollywood movies. Yeah, let's say. And characters. But coming back to your question, to the Lucila question, which is very good question. I have two remarks. One related to our paper and the call that we included in this paper, and hopefully all the readers, those curious leaders of this paper, notice is that call for all those scholars to delve into the energy policy failure. And I would be extremely happy if somewhere in the world, maybe in Japan or in Spain or in Italy or in Trinidad and Tobago or maybe in Belgium or maybe in Florence, there will be a course on energy policy failures driven by our humble paper, or just it can be a sparkle, yeah, for this type of studies. And we really do encourage those lawyers, but also other scholars, the economists, engineers, also to discuss energy policy failures using our framework, or just criticizing our framework, but discussing energy policy failures, because as we show in our paper and together with notable colleagues in this special issue, there's a bunch, a load of those energy policy failures, and we can use them for more just energy policy, better energy policy, those ambitious energy policy, etc. And referring to this legal education, so the second point I want to address is that in the Economist, like I think two editions back, there was a special report on the regulatory state, and its key message is that the state is doing more, is bigger and is broader when it comes to its actions, and the state needs those who gonna implement those activities. And it's also a reference to the Maria question, to how to omit those energy policy failures, etc. So we need those educated public servants who would work for those regulatory authorities, either in energy or on environment, or in other branches or parts of this big government that's dealing with different elements of those public activities, even COVID, yeah, or pandemic, yeah. We also have this discussion about energy poverty, for instance, here. Yeah, so there are those elements of energy issues also in this big pandemic movement, or those studies that appear. But still, we need those educated public servants who could work for those growing administration. And that's why this energy justice matters here. And energy policy is important with all those policy failures, from which we can learn something. and then omit those mistakes, those fallen projects, etc.
Well, now, Lucila, now we are dying to know. Huh?
Am I there to answer the question? It's to answer. Thank you, Raphael. Actually, it's curious because then I had doubts about doing economy or law, and this was my dilemma when I was in my 70s, because I don't know if you for those who know, but I'm Brazilian, so I grew up in Brazil, and I never understood the inequality of living in a place in which a favela can sit next to very elite and rich areas. So I wanted to understand, and I thought economy was the best course for me until I got convinced by a lawyer that actually law is the legal tool to transform society. And I think I made it a good choice at that point.
Now I really feel outnumbered among all the legal experts here. Okay, I'll confess, I made the wrong choice then.
This is a tricky debate. This is a really tricky debate.
If you don't mind, I will ask a really nice question submitted by Teresia, and then we can go back to Maria and Lucila. So Teresia, thanks for your question. It's a long question, but it's very relevant. So she refers to Indonesia, saying that Indonesia is about to implement a carbon tax policy in April, so very soon. She also reminds us that Indonesia is still an emerging economy, almost development economy, right? Almost to be. And then she's asking, okay, we still have many people that live in poverty. So the risk is that this carbon tax will increase energy prices in the country. And yeah, but at the same time, it would put Indonesia on a track to be more decarbonized, right? So yeah, so she is asking to Raphael and Maciej to comment how that tax can be made just, right, for all people in the country. Any advice you can give?
Yeah, I mean, I can begin by saying that, first of all, there needs to be more open communication. And, you know, I would say, Leonardo, that we need more people like you who are economists who wish to work with lawyers, so we can get that proper message across that, you know, the law does work, and it can also
it's an economy.
It can also achieve good things. So Teresa Smarno is also an economist. So again, and I would say that she and some co-authors do have a paper forthcoming in the special issue as well. So you can read more in depth on Indonesia, but I would say that we need the communication to go out there that there are multiple benefits of a carbon tax, and one of the major benefits of a carbon tax is it should reorient capital, in essence finance, towards the low carbon sector. As people look to the low carbon sector to provide solutions, people also think about a lot more innovation, because what is happening is we are charging the full cost of fossil fuel energy. And yes, there may be different challenges in an emerging economy, such as energy poverty, but let's say we can see huge advances in energy poverty research all over the world. And I think we have to remember that carbon taxes do not always mean that energy poverty is going to be affected. And we can look at the different options in terms of carbon tax that have been introduced around the world, particularly, let's say, some recent examples in Canada, also South Africa, that there are lots of positives. And, you know, I'll hand over to Maciej after, but I would just say I will add a recent paper in energy economics, which is a combination of economists and a couple of lawyers, which actually explores the Indonesian case in more depth. So it should be some nice bedtime reading for some of you later tonight.
that's for me because it's almost midnight in Japan. But coming back to this wonderful question, I think we also highlighted this issue in our humble paper because no one should be left behind, and that's why when introducing these policies, we should also, or the policymakers, to omit those policy failures, should think about those weaker, those that are at risk of getting into energy poverty or being excluded, like those movements with yellow vests in France, yeah, or other groups that can emerge that could be excluded during energy transition, like miners, for instance. Yeah, this should be organized energy transition, not just a wild energy transition, like wild privatization that happened in 90s, yeah, in some parts of the world, or other unsteered or uncoordinated activities. That's why here this position of energy regulators or other authorities or those programs that could support those vulnerable consumers or even industries, yeah, like those that are at risk of carbon carbon leakage, the moving the industry towards other parts of the world where those burdens, climate burdens, do not affect. So it's also important to take into account this global approach, as we mentioned at the beginning, because when we have this consensus globally and locally, also with or geographically, then it's easier to tackle those type of problems that can emerge. So dialogue is very important, as well as offering something for those who could be excluded in these different activities, like new carbon incentives, those taxes, etc.
Thank you both for sharing that.
If I may add a point, Leo, about this.
Sure, sure.
I think it's something that we discuss a lot on the one of our course of FSA that we use to training regulators in Brazil. And I think one of the big issues that we can find it not in Europe or US, but especially in South America, it's what you call transplant. So it's the idea of bringing solutions, regulatory solutions adopted in EU or in US to these countries. The risk of doing this in the case of carbon tax is that you transplant one instrument, but don't transplant all instruments. And carbon tax is one instrument, of course, that would help to the energy transition that can be effective to increase the price of energy. But then if you don't have the other instruments, renewable schemes, so how many instruments you have, if you have a financing to support the more renewables or more energy efficient, if you don't have a reformulation of your transmission system networks to ensure dispatching of these renewables. So if you don't have like all the regulatory framework working together, which is not only one legal tool, one legal instrument. And if you take it one, it's the most risks of the transplants. You take one piece, and this is when happens, sometimes it happens policy failure. You take only one piece, but you don't take whole package. And by experience and working with regulators outside Europe, this is the risk. I don't know if the case of Indonesia, if this is the case of carbon in which you take one piece, but it might, one risk of definitely would occur in policy failures. And definitely, I think this is the point in which this special issue is so important. We speak about lessons taken. I don't know if there is a paper on transplants. Transplants has been a debate very well discussed in the 90s and early 2000s, but it's something that always goes back when it comes to countries like countries in Africa or South America, especially. But I think this could be a way of looking this issue and anticipated risks of having carbon tax.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lucila. Okay, so I'll suggest we do one more round of questions with the discussants. And I see that our audience is meanwhile, activated. So I'll ask the two discussants to each still ask one question, and then we go to the questions of the audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Yeah. So thanks for your answer. Yeah, the topic is very interesting because transplants is a topic that needs economics and lawyers working together and changing frameworks for the long run. So I think, Lucila was right. The transplants topic was, really studied by comparative lawyers in the past. In energy regulation now is very needed. So yeah, this is a really tricky topic to be dealt in the future. So we were touching before another critical aspects of the regulatory design that go to the topic of working together economic and lawyers and also anthropologists, social scientists, philosophers. And this is a topic I would like to discuss now. I mean, we need to embrace multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches that have traditionally been missing in the energy regulation approaches. And now they are much needed for the energy transition, especially under the ambitious Green Deal agenda. And this is actually the value added of your social justice approach. So if we speak about energy failure, energy justice, or even governance by indicators, we can see a profound interdisciplinarity dimension. So energy justice not only speaks about distributive, restitutive, or procedural justice, but it also represents justice. So to test the validity of governance by indicators, these papers adopt sophisticated data that is not common for lawyers. So how do you see the idea of policy failure move ahead with or without interdisciplinarity? And how are all these disciplines, how can we work together?
Well, very simply, I think the nature of legal research, but also legal education is changing. And I think one of the key areas you can consider that is if you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, you have 17 key development goals there. And I think as we look towards business in the future, all business will need to take in mind those 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. So for me, it becomes an obligation of a lawyer to understand risk in future in different ways. And by risk, I mean, when you're trying to contract for certain issues where you may cross into one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there will be a risk if you don't do something that makes sure that that contract has, some of those 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals in mind. And in order to properly account for that risk and within that legal contract, or within the drafting of new legislation, you're going to have to consult with other disciplines. So the days, let's say, of the lawyer working in the library alone on the 10th floor, into the night at 11 or 12 to 2 or 3 in the morning, they're finished for me. Equally, the days of sitting at home and writing your single author textbook or masterpiece that's 1,000 pages long. I don't know any student who's actually going to even buy that 1,000-page book anymore, to be honest. Nor are they even going to read it. And I think the legal scholar or student of tomorrow has to embrace data. Some people, I've written small things about it before. We put so much data about ourselves up online, every single day. I know that Maciej is an avid user of Twitter, perhaps Facebook as well, and a couple of other social media platforms. But we think of the young students, they're all using them. Some of them are even posting lots of videos up on TikTok. I haven't searched for Maciej yet on TikTok, but I'll see if he has some videos from his Japanese experiences. But we as lawyers need to embrace data. We need to challenge ourselves like never before. And for me, I'm afraid that if we don't do it, in essence, our research is going to become somewhat outdated, because there will be other lawyers, there will be other interdisciplinary research groups who are inviting lawyers to be part of that research group, and their research will supersede other research. And let's say for me, I can already see that in different energy, environment, climate change, sustainability groups around Europe, around the world, and you see them, they are recruiting lawyers as postdocs, they are recruiting lawyers into their team as assistant profs, because they want that assistant prof to evolve to a professor in their particular research group or research center. So for me, the more you embrace this interdisciplinary research as a lawyer, you are going to have a very successful career.
Yeah, actually, I play Japanese mandolin. I can say this well known in kabuki theater, so it's called shamisen. Yeah, so but I don't have a TikTok. But encouraged by this wonderful address by Raphael, maybe I should launch one and offer some legal approach played or performed on this wonderful instrument. But trying to be a bit more serious is in our paper, we try to offer this legal approach to different colleagues, to different disciplines, to those colleagues from economics, from engineering studies, social studies, to use this legal approach, which is not like this 1,000 pages book that Raphael mentioned, that is like an essence of this legal thinking with energy justice theory, which we think is quite open and easy to apply by those other scholars. And that's why we really do encourage to use this framework for different fields. So it's very open legal approach that can be an element of a bigger picture used by other scholars doing their own research. And that's why I also believe that law should be very simple, like regulatory decisions. For instance, I'm a great fan of very simple regulatory decisions that are easy to understand, because lawyers should not be like those wizards in ancient Egypt or in China, where they could only decode all those wise books, etc. So we should offer very simple language for those who are interested in this energy transition through a prism of their energy bill, like energy consumers, because otherwise we will commit another energy policy failure by offering too sophisticated solutions to very simple problems like affordability of energy bills. So we should not, by our formal approach, be too strict or too sophisticated, because otherwise we will simply commit another failure with the use of this very formal bureaucratic attitude. And that's why we will also block this access to this knowledge and building those bridges with different approaches. And of course, I truly agree with this multidisciplinary approach. Lawyer is a kind of engineer of social studies, I think, yeah, to some extent, of course, and we can be very flexible and adjust to those other disciplines and be an added value, as Raphael mentioned, in different projects, teams, etc., etc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think if I could add at this point, and I think this was what we tried to do in the paper we submitted to this to the special issue that you both edited. And one thing that we tried to do is say, okay, we are 3 lawyers co-writing the paper, but let's try to leave your comfort zone. And let's try to think seriously which kind of methodology you can use to validate what you wanted to say. So the idea was the paper has the purpose of taking one as example, a case study of one indicator used in Europe, which we departed from the hypothesis that there was possible. So let's test the validity of this indicator. And to test this validity, what you have to do is we have to dig into deep quantity of data to check it, whether both methodology and the data of these indicators were corrected, and concluded from the legal perspective in the sense of saying what what law can answer to this issue. It's an issue. There is a responsibility, accountability, like strict liability sense that we can bring into this issue. But I think this was one of the questions. But I think we should give more space to the audience who has now many questions. But I think one thing that it's very close to what Raphael said and what Maciej said is that if you wanted to deal with interdisciplinary, we have to, as a legal scholars, to leave the comfort zone and borrow methodologies from other disciplines, collaborated with other disciplines. If you don't master coding interviews, but it requires from us the better understanding and thinking about what, if you wanted to support a claim, if you wanted to understand it, or if you want to propose a new regulation, what kind of methodology we can adopt it in our research to prove what you were saying, and not write papers in which are more stylized opinion than actually a truly academic research. And this requires a change in the way we study law, the change in the way what we think legal scholars, the role of legal scholars. And I think this energy policy special issue comes to contribute it on thinking in this way, and energy justice as well. Leo?
Okay, thank you, Lucila. So as you suggested, let's then move to the questions, 2 questions submitted by our participants, and I'll just read out both of them because they're somewhat connected. So, and then you can react to the part you prefer to react. We have first Joseph saying, in Africa, we still have the challenge of low energy access and limited access to clean alternative technologies. So on the other hand, we have a lot of reserves for fossil fuels. So in this background, how best can energy justice be assured, right, in the specific context of Africa? Then we have Emma that has a background in intellectual property rights. And she is saying, how can we reconcile the cost of innovation with carbon taxes? So maybe we want access to this new carbon efficient technology. And yeah, but how does that then connect with patented technology, right? Yeah, so you can take the questions as you prefer.
Yeah, I'll be brief, bearing in mind the time, but just in terms of Joseph's question, you know, clean energy technology is now more accessible than ever. You are able to get clean energy technology that can target a very small community, you know, to an even bigger community. So from a very small village, you know, to a town, and then possibly making an impact on the energy used by a city. And what I would have a question for you is, when you think of fossil fuel development in developing countries, you know, it is still happening. And this is what people talk about, all these big reserves that are there. I would question how much these reserves are actually financially viable without some subsidy of some sort. Have a look through about some of the subsidies that are provided for roads or railway lines to make sure that the energy companies can get their product from point A to point B. And who is paying for those roads? Who is paying for those train lines? Usually it is the government who are borrowing money from abroad, and they are funding these transport projects to facilitate energy development. by having foreign finance and having more and more debt. An alternative would be, why not borrow the money for clean energy projects internationally instead of borrowing that money for the fossil fuel-based products? So there are some potential solutions. I'm not going to deny it's a very difficult issue, but we do see some great success stories around the world. And I would encourage you to read some of the articles from the special issue, but also there is some great research out there. In terms of the issues around patents, I mean, to me, that is a key problem in the solution for having, well, let's say, firstly, for meeting our Paris climate change commitments Paris Agreement climate change commitments by 2030, but also meeting 2050 and 2060 targets. And I think in today's world, we have to take a leaf out of what has just happened in terms of COVID. And I'm sure that some of you know that Moderna, which did have a patent on their vaccine, their COVID-19 vaccine, they have allowed other countries to produce or to make that drug essentially patent-free. And if we are to achieve what we want in terms of the energy and climate change sector, we have to do away with patents for clean technology. And I'm not talking about carbon efficient technology, I'm talking about clean technology. We should be trying to spread clean technology patent-free all over the world so people can go ahead and do that. And I think we showed with COVID-19, we could make an impact if we so desired as a global population. So there is some lessons to be learned from the current crisis that we could apply to the energy and climate change sector.
Yeah, regarding the second question, I also had this COVID vaccine success with developing them in my head. Raphael was quicker, or he was reading in my head, like you, maybe because of those vaccines. Yeah, so you know what I mean. And but being serious, so again, the global consensus is needed to break those patents approach, because just take a look at electric vehicles right now. For instance, let's try to talk with Mr. Musk and Tesla about offering those patent free of charge for all those interested in printing out their electric vehicle with the use of a 3D printer, for instance, which is in theory possible. But I also believe that some people can do it in their own garages. But that's the thing. So we have those big companies right now. And again, there's a great field for those energy regulators or regulators in general, as well as governments, to find a solution, either via international agreements and those global commitment to sharing those patents, or under the auspices of other international organizations, like, for instance, World Bank, offering funding for the new developments, new research, and then opening those patents like free of charge, because let's say this is kind of international funding, international commitment, global money, and then offering these solutions for the mankind, let's say, or for those global crises like climate issue is. So again, this regulatory approach can offer some solutions, and global attitude can be support also in terms of those intellectual property rights.
Thank you, Maciej. Lucila or Maria, you want to add anything?
I wanted to say, yeah, this is something that takes me to consider the idea of what about framing our legal systems, and I'm talking here globally, to search for the common good. I mean, our regulatory systems in the energy sector are not framed for that, obviously, but I mean, energy poverty at this point, considering also the losers of the new global geopolitics, because I mean, if we start investing, and they already lower their prices, energy renewables, I'm talking here about clean energy in general, the prices are already down. I mean, investors are putting money in that. Green financing is growing. So what are we going to do with the losers, with Africa, with the African countries that are going to be losing, with Russia, with fossil fuel producers, with Arabia? What are we going to do with them in the market, in the global market? And what is the common good here? I mean, how can we react to this? Because this is all complex. And if we want to take a share into the common good, into a common good discourse in the energy sector, which is really related to justice approach, what would you say on this? Thank you.
I see them thinking, Maria.
Yeah.
I mean, if in terms of taking a justice approach to a more global approach, if that's what you're thinking, I mean, to me, I mean, in many ways, this is already happening, because let's say from the research point of view, we see researchers of all disciplines working on justice issues. And let's say, to me, that's a lesson for lawyers today. If you look at the energy justice research in the leading journals, such as Energy Policy, where this special issue is published, probably 90% of the researchers are from other disciplines. 10% or less are actually lawyers. And for me, lawyers have a lot to catch up on. And we can see that infiltrate professional law. We can see that infiltrate lawyers who are working as in-house counsels for energy companies. And we can also see it in terms of judges and courtroom decisions. But I would just say you can follow some of the recent courtroom decisions and think about judges are beginning to change their mind. And we had that big decision against Shell in the Netherlands last year. And when you have a decision like that against Shell, where essentially the court wants to interfere in Shell's corporate strategy, to me, that gives great incentive for the UN, other international agencies to begin to act. And let's say for there to be some type of global governance justice perspective that emerges in this area. So if that picks up on what you were trying to say, that would be my view. It's sort of in a way maybe a reverse takeover.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
Regarding
Raphael.
Africa, just one comment. I think that Africa has a great capacity also when it comes to human, when it comes to those young people who are very good scholars, and it's also a matter of giving them chances to involve them in this research and development also by offering some scholarship, etc. And they can be very progressive entrepreneurs then. And in renewable industry, there are many local businesses also in Africa that even start charging mobile phones in those dispersed areas, etc., by building those resilient energy communities with PV panels, etc., or even those mega projects that can be state assets, not only in solar, but also in offshore. And I'm not speaking about the minerals, the resources that Africa has for the needs of batteries, etc., because it's a chance for some countries, but also it can be a problem for them and for the world. I believe that it's another challenge that we need to tackle soon when it comes to regulatory approach to those resources used for the batteries like cobalt, etc.
Thank you, Maciej. We're out of time. It flew by. So we always like to close on time, right, in these 1 hour events. So what remains for me to do is just to thank you. Thank you, Maria, for joining us as a discussant. Of course, thanks for Lucila to mobilize everybody. Really great. And thanks to Maciej. I understood it's 10 in the evening for you, and Raphael must be more or less 10 in the morning for you. So really great to have you here. For me, what I learned is that it was not only about energy policy failures, but we turned out to be discussing the future of the legal scholar domain field as being something that will not only be more multidisciplinary, but also something that will think more about what legal should look like, and not only about what it currently is, right? That's what I understood. That was also quite new for me as a non-lawyer, that you as legal expert are also questioning your own field of research. That's nice to learn. And it seems to be that I am among like-minded people here, right? Regarding what should be the future of the legal discipline. So really great. Thank you for sharing all that with us. Thank you for everyone attending. And as you know, you still have the videos you can watch. There is this special issue that is coming out. And you will also have a recording of this event in case you want to have a look. Thank you.
Okay.